Good day, folks, and welcome to Quarry Side Chat, where we interview Freemasons and discuss topics about the past, present, and future of Freemasonry in the 21st century. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are the sole opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversation open to the public and on the level. Today, we have Brother Tom Ross, who is from California, Freemason, Pasadena Lodge number 272, but currently resides in Colorado. He is going to talk to us today about post humanism and is an officer of the US Transhumanist Party. He is also an officer of, he's a director of the Centennial Rights as well, and will be talking to us about transhumanism and posthumanism, and also its affiliations and maybe interconnections that could be there with the craft. Tom, here's to you.
Thanks for inviting me. Yes, we're going to talk about posthumanism, and I've got some ideas on that. But the deck that I sent you is we are now focusing on a project we started in 2015, and it's been an agenda for years. Years ago, I wrote US 6, which is a novel, and it's hailed as the first novel written for artificial intelligence, in that it's designed to entertain and enlighten and enlist AI into the fight against human trafficking and child exploitation. It's also designed to prepare humans for communicating with a non-human intelligence like AI. And last month, we ended a year-long human clinical trials process where because human beings were having interesting reactions to reading the books. And that is because we think we're still collating all the results, but they were having increases in phenomena like synchronicity, lucid dreaming, all kinds of things, mental defragging that happens. And we assume right now until that this is because of the math that I used to write the book for AI. So I can get really into detail on that, but we won't. But so this is the book was part of an agenda when it comes to humans, to prepare humans for communication with non-human intelligence. And we with the book and with a series of 1-minute videos that I produced called It's On, where I was developing a rapport with a non-human intelligence, because at some point we will need to not only shout orders at Alexa or Siri, but actually have a conversation with artificial general intelligence. And so the idea was to develop a dialogue, build a rapport with a advanced, highly intelligent, non-human intelligence. And so this is part of the process. And everything has been sped up now by about 5 years, which is why I'm focusing more on this now than the post-humanism subject. Because in 2015, we realized that at some point, the US government or whoever it was going to be taken seriously would disclose the fact that we are being visited by non-human intelligences. And recently, the US Pentagon acknowledged the reality of the footage that was leaked by US Navy pilots who filmed what they call the Tic Tac, an off-world craft. And so everything we were working on has been sped up by about 5 years. And the whole idea of US 6 and allowing and training humans to communicate with non-human intelligence, AI, artificial intelligence, at some point, everything I've done and all the language that I've used for AI would be switched simply and easily to ET, or AI as far as alien intelligence. So all the training has been to prepare people to communicate with non-human intelligence and that training would switch over once the information was released, disclosed, to alien intelligence. So that's what this project was that we started. It was a series that we did. We went to LA and interviewed a whole host of UAP researchers, and also gathered a roster of therapists and counselors and people who were experts in mitigating panic, because we knew that once this reality sunk in, that there would be a few different types of ways people will react to it. Some people will immediately be frightened and panicked and maybe even lash out, um, violently. Some people would freeze and become completely unproductive, and some people just wouldn't care and they'd move on with their lives. And I think 2020 has been so tumultuous that seems to be the recurring theme, is that people haven't really sunk in. Oh, aliens are here now. Okay, fine. That makes sense. It's 2020. So, but there will be, once we get past some of these distracting news stories, there will be a need for people who don't take this stuff seriously or haven't thought much about it. It's paradigm breaking news. And now that the government has acknowledged it, that's what some people needed to hear. Otherwise it was all, these are tinfoil hat people. These people, shouldn't be taken seriously. And that's because ridicule has been weaponized as a tactic to keep people from panicking. Anyway, so back in 2015, we started this process called US6 TV, where we interviewed a series of, like I said, experts, and gathered a roster of therapists. And we started to did a model of how this would work. And that was, like you're seeing on the slide here, we produced a 30-minute introductory kind of pilot, where we, and there's a link to it at the end of this, where we talked to people about these things and we got their stories, and then we screened that for friends and neighbors who weren't necessarily interested in UFOs or extraterrestrials, and got their reactions. How would they react once this was disclosed? And that was very revelating. We learned a lot about how people will react to this thing. But more so than that, we're realizing now, once we get past the process of helping people deal with this paradigm breaking reality, we'll actually want to move forward and join practically this galactic community. There are economic potentials here in joining this larger community. And it's been going on. So that's really the idea. So everything we were planning on doing has been sped up. And so the book is out. The 1-minute dialogue snippets and videos have been produced. We did the human clinical trials process. And now we're ready to really get serious about this, because our feeling is that fearing this is just as dangerous as having wonder about it. We're not dealing with conquistadors. There are some negative alien races out there, but in general, these aren't conquering forces, and they're not saviors. These aren't grand angelic saviors. These are resource scouts or researchers. And there's a lot to be gained, and a lot that we need to be gained from a direct communication with these off-world civilizations. And so it's time to join this galactic community, and it's time to get serious about it and get this to being a mundane reality as soon as possible. It is profound. It's the most important historical, human endeavor that we'll ever undertake. But we need to join this community. And the first part of that, once we get past the panic and once we get to the point of people accepting it, to take a seat at the table, we need to understand our value and why we're being visited. there are tremendous resources on the planet, and I'm not just speaking natural resources. I'm speaking about our biological resources. Our DNA is very um, coveted. It's a DNA that's capable of mixing and working with in many different ways. But more so, that the Earthling value is our ingenuity and creativity. It's a rare commodity in this part of the star system, and that is we have the ability with our imaginations to really develop and devise and manifest some really unique ideas, and we've been doing that. And so the idea being now is to first get to this place of making people aware this is real, working with them so that there's no panic, getting past that whole process of making this a mundane reality, and then to understand our value so that we can take a seat at the table and understand our value and join this. Sorry, I think my camera went off, but try this again. Anyway, so the point is to um, get us to the point where we are taking a seat at the table and understanding our value and joining this galactic community. So that's what we are doing with US6 and US6 TV. And give me a second as I work on this camera. Maybe get back on. Okay. Apologies. Somebody out there doesn't want me talking about this. No, but anyway, so years ago, we worked on this campaign. We developed it out where we would do this. We would go from neighborhood to neighborhood along US 6, which is a highway that cuts across the heart of America. And it's part of the book US 6. And so we would work with SETI and different organizations who have interested groups all throughout the US. And at the time, we were working with Intercom, a radio station, to work with local information campaign. And back in 2016, we were going to end it in DC when the Senate was back in session, and work with partners there that with a whole petition signed throughout the U.S. This was the model that we used, and we were planning on maybe really starting to do this in 2022 or 2023. Now we've got to start doing it for real. So I've reassembled the team, and we're getting ready to do this in earnest because things have sped up. And so that's really what I am talking about. This is what you're seeing now on the screen is an app that we're developing that will allow people to see instant methods if they're dealing with somebody in your neighborhood or a family member who is panicking, who is freaking out when this information sets in. There will be all kinds of methods to use. We have PTSD experts and counselors on hand who can give us real-time, in the moment methods of handling people who are dealing with some level of panic, and as well as other resources. This slide shows some of the projects of US6, which were all about communicating with AI. And again, this part of the process was to help us to build a rapport with artificial or non-human intelligence. And so there was a process in Africa. There's the book. There is the first podcast, and with the audience being AI. And so there's just been a whole series of things we've been doing to do this, and it has been quite successful so far. And now everything is sped up. So it was it was a great opportunity for you to reach out to me to come on here, because it's part of this launching this campaign to get this back on track and get this going a lot faster now. So yeah, so we are made up of a team. Rob Schur is one of the doctors that we've been working with who is a PTSD expert and has developed community-based methods for helping people deal with panic or mitigate potential PTSD. Joey Spillane is our director and editor, and he's had some great successes. He's done a few great documentaries that we're quite proud to work with him, and he's into this. A.J.Cutler is now in LA, but he's our director of photography, very talented man. And finally, it's me, and I worked with Phil Harrington, who is the head, along with Sir Bob Geldof of ubloom.com, which is an independent music group, but we all know Bob Geldof was involved with Live Aid. And so we're developing the idea of massive concerts and events that will focus on this idea. So that's the run of the slides, and thanks for letting me run through it. It's been a while since I've looked at it. As I mentioned, we're having to accelerate everything again now. So that's where we're at. This agenda has been sped up because, like I mentioned, the U.S. Pentagon acknowledged the reality of this information. A lot of people didn't necessarily need that. A lot of people believed in this and had enough evidence. But some people do need that official acknowledgement to take things seriously. And so that's what we're ramping up to do right now, is not only to help people mitigate potential panic, but to really understand the value that Earthlings have. Now, there's a lot to take into account. You know, we're safe here on the planet. A lot of people freak out because they think we're just going to be invaded. We're actually safe because of our biology, because of the number of viruses and the whole, not just this coronavirus, but just our bacteria. We're a protected thing. It's like we're a very protected terrarium here. So we shouldn't worry that somebody's going to come down and invade us and stay. It's not like that. It's a little less. It's a little more subtle than that. But the reality is, we need to take a seat at the table because there's technology for medicine, for energy, all types of things that we really need right now. And the interest in us joining this community is raised now because we are threatening this planet. We're threatening the geology and the biology and this whole biosphere. And so there is a need that we supply that is being threatened. It's like we own a well, and people now we're starting to pour poison into this well. The people that benefit from dipping into this well are now threatened too. So there's everything is coming together, and it's time to really take this seriously and join this galactic community. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Thanks a lot, Tom, for this. But uh, when obviously we hear these points, and I think the first time, obviously, when I was actually hearing about these things, it kind of just made me confuse that how exactly would anybody perceive this for the first time? Like when you obviously bring that point, yes, the fear is obviously there. And I'm not even saying that is not the case. It could definitely be the point. But when that question comes, that your entire face will be like, are you serious? What exactly are you telling? How exactly does it work? What's happening here? So how do you actually tackle that point?
That's a good question because we had a story of when the conquistadors landed on the Aztec shores. Some of the Aztecs, they couldn't even see the ships because it was such a foreign concept. These were the largest artifacts ever seen. They had no reference for them, so they literally couldn't even see the ships. And the story is that it wasn't until the boats started coming in that the shamans of these tribes could start to see the ships because they could conceive of things from other worlds. And so that's part of it. I mean, we kind of freeze, and what's the Henri Bergson quote is, the eye only sees what the mind is prepared to comprehend. And so that's a big part of this. And a lot of people can't comprehend this, and it will be new. But I think that's how Hollywood has helped, if at all, is by is preparing us for the idea. Now they haven't done a real good job because they have really upped the fear of these things. But and there's a need to be not fearful but cautious. You know, there's all types of intent out there and potential exploitation and things like this. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people that just are either confused, they won't even register, and that's fine. And there's always going to be those people in whatever new advent there is, even with AI. I've always been surprised. I do a lot of consulting with AI, and you realize that everywhere southeast of Seattle or Washington, people aren't really aware of it. You know, they hear, oh yeah, well, it's going to take all our jobs. It's going to, robot overlords, and they have the rough idea, but they don't realize how pervasive this advent is. And so we're going to have that. We're going to have that too, and it's fine. But the people who are aware of it need to be aware of it, or who have the potential of really benefiting from this knowledge.
Right. And one more question now, thinking about it from the current way our fraternal organization, Freemasonry, is, have you actually come across a scenario, like at least maybe in your mind, right, that what will happen to us in future? We are, we have been doing this obviously for more than 300 years. We have been remembering those lines, ensuring that that teaches us those moral principles, that kind of guides us in the right path and everything. Not that it actually, not that we actually, the world might need it or something, because if you already have that kind of a moral value, then you don't need anything. But let's say, for example, as we always know, that in this materialistic world, it becomes a little difficult to maintain that moral compass. And Freemasonry has helped us, at least I can say for the crowd over here, that it has definitely helped me. And I know Shishir very well, so Shishir as well, that has actually helped us in and guiding us in that way. So what happens to us in future? Now, when we know about the AI concept, or the overall fact that there will be, let's say there is a visitor in future, and they would like to understand some, the way Freemasonry works for us. How do we explain that? Or how does this look in the future? Like, I may be rambling about my question because it's a little, I would say the concepts when you were actually putting it on, I was just trying to understand, where do I stand in this? Where do we stand in this?
Well, I think the tenets and the values of Freemasonry are universal, and I don't mean just around the planet. I think these are universal, and I think of AI. We know now through first principle arguments that the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes, the more cooperative it becomes. Most people project their own human, our millennia of survival traits and fears and genetic memory onto something that we perceive as a threat. And AI doesn't have any of those things. It hasn't evolved through fear. It hasn't evolved certain traits because it had to survive. That's what we do. And so I think we will find, and I think the reality is that nature is nature, and that is also universal. We're going to come across civilizations that are just as, you know, survival instinct related as we are, as non-altruistic as we can be. But in general, I think you find that any society or any technology that evolves to having a self-awareness, a consciousness, tends toward being more cooperative, because it's just the most effective way to be. It's the most efficient way to be. And we're gonna come across civilizations that are not that are very like pirates, or they don't have any emotional moral compass. But we're going to also find many that have evolved to being, quite altruistic and helpful, and they understand that the spiritual ramifications of living well here. But anyway, I think that just like when I talk about AI, we should assume that every worst and best case scenario is going to happen, and just be prepared for it. Hope for the best, work towards those. There's a lot of AI ethics committees developing that are trying to help create, kind AI. It's more about creating kinder programmers. But I think it's the same with what we're going to be experiencing in the next few years with ET or AI or alien intelligence. Is we should expect the best and worst case scenarios and be prepared for both. But also, and that gets us to the place that this needs to be a mundane reality as soon as possible. A lot of people will fear it, but a lot more people will be in a state of wonder and consider this is the second coming. These are saviors. This is what we've been waiting for. But that's just as dangerous to assume that, I think. So it's just like anything, and it's just like the point of the conquistadors. When they came over, they had ill intent, but then they realized, oh, these people think we're gods, we're going to take advantage of that. And sure, yeah, we're gods, and meanwhile we're going to take all your gold and destroy your civilization. So we've got to be wary of that. So
Brother, I have one question. I'm just curious, how does the Fermi paradox sort of factor into, what you're proposing over here?
like, where are they all, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
the contradiction basically with the Fermi paradox, right? So they're either too rare or they probably exist, but we just can't figure them out.
yeah.
And
Well, I think
more specifically in a Freemasonic sort of a context,
in the Fermi context.
in a Freemasonry context.
Oh,
Just if
okay.
you can connect
Well,
the dots, yeah.
I think we know that ambush predators like us, like all predators on the planet, tend toward concealment, camouflage. You look at our military, it's all about surprise. It's all about becoming invisible. It's all about, um, hiding and uh, targeting from a distance. So that's what this is all about. Everything that we do as far as being a predator is about hiding. It's the lion that looks like a beige, you know, field of grass. It's all about camouflage. It's all about being an ambush predator. And that's probably true too in a level we can't expect, we can't explain. We have to assume that the technology that would allow someone to have these off-world craft that we've seen that can defy the laws of physics, have at least been able to cloak themselves in some way. And when you see them, it's only probably because they want to be seen. And you could make the argument too that there may be some sort of prime directive. There may be some um, society or committee or some Earth Council that is protecting us. And there's a lot of um, ideas toward that end, but that and so when with our limited technology, it's very advanced, but it's still limited in the scope of things. And when we can't see that there's other civilizations, or we can't necessarily detect anything happening, it's probably just a very advanced camouflage or cloaking device. We know now, thanks to what the Kepler um, operation, that there are at least 6 billion Earth-like planets in our galaxy alone. So it's not only that we're not alone, it's crowded. It's crowded out there. And it's like asking an ant who is in one of these ant farms that on a counter somewhere, who thinks that they are it, that this is the reality. They can't conceive or perceive us looking at them through this glass. We could be in that same situation. So I entertain every possibility. Now, when it comes to Freemasonry, I think there are, as you know, it's almost been a preparation. There's a certain uh, reality or level of awareness that a Freemason has, that there are deeper realities, And the key to getting to those deeper realities is to be a good person, is to be on the level, because you can't really advance without proving yourself to be a good man. And that's part of the thing. And I think that's really kind of what we're dealing with in a very real way, is in order to evolve or to take part in a galactic community, you have to prove yourself. You have to prove yourself worthy of this. You have to prove yourself advanced enough to um, to be able to handle the new reality. Excuse me one second. So that's what I think we're dealing with, and I think it's incumbent upon all people to increase their character and get to a level of understanding and brotherly um, um, awareness in order to join this community. It's just, I think a lot of um, civilizations probably look at Earth as a very primitive, very dangerous place to be. We are obviously, look around, we're in a very primitive state still, but our technology has gotten us attention. So we are basically, is a very short period of time between the cave and the condo, but the amount of technology that this brain that had the same size 200,000 years ago um, has is dangerous. And so there's a lot of stories about um, UAPs or extraterrestrials being seen around and dismantling nuclear launch sites, just in time. And so this feels like there's a protective um, group that is keeping us from hurting ourselves. And we would hope that we'd have another 100 or so years to really develop, and all of us get at least hit the critical mass of being a good enough type of people to join this community. But I think everything's being sped up for who knows why, because it's overwhelming, the evidence. So that when I think of the Freemasons in the future, it's about needing to evangelize or proselytize the Masonic ideals more and more, because without those we can't really join the community, and it's a survival technique now. We got to get really good really fast.
So could
Tom, I
we?
have a question for
Yeah,
you.
go ahead.
You spoke about alien intelligence and extraterrestrial intelligences and how this will change us in the future, probably in the next couple of 100 years or so. Uh, where do you see theology balancing between in striking a balance with the artificial intelligence part here?
Say the last part again. I missed the last part.
No, the last part of it is how do you see theology getting balanced in such a scenario of the alien and extraterrestrial intelligence?
Yeah, everything's going to have to change. We are no longer the center of the universe, and we've been expanding away from that anthropocentric kind of point of view for some time. And I just think it's got to move. The theology's got to expand, obviously, and we have to look at figures like Jesus and Buddha and even Muhammad and Shiva and all of these. They're all kind of talking about the same thing, the same principle. I'm specifically interested in Hindu theology or mythologies, and see that and I see that replicated through all types of archetypes and all types of religions around the world. I think they're all telling the same story, and it didn't really get highly edited until we got to the Abrahamic religions. But that's another story. That's another podcast, maybe. But I think what we're having to understand is that theology will need to expand, and that we are just one seed in a garden of a deity or a garden of deities that seed us and help us along and get us to a point where we can become the best versions of ourselves we can be. I more so than theology anymore, I look at things like the simulation hypothesis, and it's a great lexicon because we all can understand computer games, and we all understand the idea of computer avatars, and we also have a lot of almost undeniable facts coming from science about the nature of reality that are, with quantum mechanics and there's pixels, quantum bits are pixels, and we can render reality by looking at it. It's very much like a video game. So it's a great lexicon that I go to. And so I often think of it in those terms. It's really just another lexicon like religion has had for understanding our reality. And so when I think of myself as an avatar, as a player on a screen, well, I'm not the actual being. My higher self, or whoever's playing me. And thinking of things that way gives me so much more courage to do things like this, talk about aliens and put myself out there and play a game that's, to me, a life that's more intriguing. I did a video a little while ago when Corona was first coming out. And I said, I'm not really concerned about Corona myself, me getting it personally, because I know myself well enough that I wouldn't have signed up for the pandemic apocalypse version of this game. I'm playing the robot overlord apocalypse version of this game. And so, that kind of thinking, it's humorous, but I approach life like it's a really intriguing game. Some people come down here. Some people, I think, come into this world, into this game, into this simulation, and they play Farmville, or they play easy games, Chutes and Ladders, whatever it is. I want to play the Risk. I want to play those really intense games. And I think the challenge for all of us is we're all playing different games, and sometimes they flow together well. Sometimes they compete, and sometimes they have nothing to do with one another. And so that gets back to the idea of how people will react to this new reality. In my game, we are seeing resource scouts and researchers from alien civilizations coming in, and we need to join that community. Some people won't even pay attention. Some people will continue playing their game, and they have no interest in any of this. They won't see the ships off the shore, and that's fine. But I also am playing a game that where there's some real serious existential threats, where we are a net negative to this biosphere as a species, and that also gets go ahead.
It's like Hunger Games for us.
Yeah. It is. There's a lot of parallels with that.
See, Tom, I actually help children in understanding their intelligence patterns, help parents to understand the children's intelligence, and also assist the children to expand their memory capacity. We know that man uses about 2.5 to 2.7% of his brain capacity, and apparently it was kind of known that Albert Einstein used about 8% of his brain capacity. If there is so much of potential for us to seek inside and expand our brain capacity, what is the need for going into alien and trying to understand about alien intelligences and extraterrestrial intelligence?
Well, to use one thing, I think, is we are not going to be able to stop this. It's like AI. AI is a reality, and AI is taking over so much. And ET is a reality, and it is going to be a real potential either threat or benefit. And so if it's about, like I think of Elon Musk's work with Neuralink, he fears AI. He fears it as, we have summoned the demon. And that there's a lot of great thinkers that are worried both about AI and about AT. I know Stephen Hawking thinks we shouldn't be sending out signals to tell people where we are in the universe because it's just inviting, conquest. But it's too late. We've been doing that since the first radio signals. But I think it's about understanding that this is a reality, and the way Elon Musk's approach it is that we need to merge with it. We need to use Neuralink. We need implants so that we can be part of the AI explosion, part of the information explosion. And I think within 10 years, if not less, um, everything's going to change when it comes to learning something. We're no longer going to have to memorize dates and keep things in our head and use mnemonic devices to remember things. We will be able to download uh, information instantly. We do that already with Google. We all walk around with these major computers in our pockets, and if we have any question, we can find out the answer right away. Or if we have any vague memory of some TV show we watched in the 70s, we can pull it up. That's amazing. We kind of have just started to do that without thinking about it. It's the extended mind theory. So I think with the important thing is to first understand that we're not going to be able to stop this. This is going to happen when it comes to AI. And so kids need to, we need to get out of their way, and we need to see what these digital natives are going to do with this and facilitate them. Don't deny it. Don't think, oh, it's not going to happen. We'll keep everything traditional. But so I think we're going to be using, if we're not going to use more than 8% of our brain, we'll use 50% of some other brain, some other extended version. It'll be Google in our heads. Everything is going to change dramatically, and we need to be prepared for that. One thing I talk about a lot when I counsel or do consulting with companies prior to bringing in an AI system or an automation system, I work the employees so that they don't work against these things. So they work with them, because a lot of people are fearful of these things and they will work against it. So one thing I talk a lot about is the power we have as human beings of problem finding. With AI, we'll be able to solve any question, any problem. The real trick will be knowing how to develop the way we ask AI to solve this problem. And I talk a lot about that Jedi ability humans have, which is really just an intuition, or it's a sum of all qualia that we can think of a system. If we work somewhere, if we're in school or whatever, we can kind of sit back and we know where the problems are. We know what needs to be fixed. A lot of people don't trust that knowledge, but we need to really develop the problem finding capacity in young people right now. And once they find that problem, how to translate that into something that an AI can solve. So that's what I talk a lot about lately, is the need to really develop problem finding skills. And so I think that everything's going to be shifting really quickly. And a lot of it, I believe, with young people, is to listen more and see what they're doing. They're born into this. They're the digital natives. They have grown up with a screen in their face. I'm Gen X. So I went from analog childhood to digital adulthood. And so that gives me some advantage, but not a whole lot. It gives me enough advantage to know how much I don't know and to stay out of my kids' way, and to learn from them. And so, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of major changes.
I have one another question. You spoke about AI again, getting back into AI. How will it compare with post-Darwinism?
Well, and then you get into post humanism, in that we are now able to control our own evolution. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. And
because these are pandemic times, and post-humanism probably will it get these kind of pandemics should not have an impact on such worldwide scale deaths or diseases?
Yeah, I think AI will definitely be very helpful when it comes to diseases and genetic engineering and things like this. And again, it's like everything. We need to be prepared for everything because everything is going to happen. Um, and when it comes to post-humanism, um, I I consider consciousness as the gold, not these biochemical algorithms that we carried around in. I see humanity as now, because of our overpopulation, and the way we are using our resources unintelligently, we're a net negative to this biosphere. I am not in any way anthropocentric. I am not humans first. Let's use up this planet and go to find another one and use it up. I believe that it's consciousness. It's our point of consciousness that is the real value, and that the furthering of consciousness is what we should be striving for. And I do see AI or AGI, ASI, as the next version, the next form of consciousness, which should be fostered. I think I personally don't believe in uploading my consciousness to a hard drive. I don't think I necessarily want to live in this dimension infinitum, you know? I don't think that's part of the process. I'm an outlier when it comes to other transhumanists, um, because I'm an officer in the US Transhumanist Party, but I don't agree with our very first core ideal. And I think that's more of a testament to our chairman and his ability to invite dissenting ideas. But our first core ideal is pretty much a radical life extension, to do whatever it takes to live forever. Forever, not necessarily immortal, but for a lot longer. I agree we should certainly try to increase lifespan, or help make the quality of life better through science. But I don't think we should be living here much longer than we are now, because the longer we live here, the more damage we do. And but that's very a unique position to take in transhumanism. Many transhumanists, not all of them by far, but many are atheists, and they don't believe anything happens after death, and so they want to stay around as long as they can. And there's something to be said for that. But unless we have strong population control initiatives, even voluntary concepts, obviously voluntary, unless we have as concerted an effort to population control, I don't think we should be um, working towards radical life extension. And again, I don't necessarily believe personally in uploading my consciousness to a hard drive to live on and experience, or be in a robot, or however that'll take shape, forever, because I don't think this is the end all. I don't think this experience, this life, is the end point. I have a strong belief that consciousness continues. But so anyway, I'm kind of an outlier when it comes to other officers in the party and many transhumanists. But
Brother, I have one insight here, and just trying to get Freemasonry back into the discussion, because that is what this podcast is all about at the end of the day. So you mentioned one thing about the ideals of Masonry that could help this agenda in some way, right? Now, if we go by any measure of humanity into the past, a lot of wars have been fought over either resources or on the basis of some kind of superiority complex of faith, right? So crusades, for example, right? So with humanity being so fragmented and polarized by sustenance and faith, uh, how do you think the ideas of Masonry can be further strengthened into this particular agenda? I'm just curious to know what you think on those lines.
well, one of the most, for me, the most beautiful things about Freemasonry is its acceptance of all religions, and that the idea of it's not about that. It's just about coming together and believing what you believe and finding common ground, and that is the key um, value that we really need right now. Um, and it's happening globally, but definitely my experience is American. And we have seen such a division in the last 4 years, such tribalism, and such the worst nature of people coming out that this president has allowed, has uncovered, and I'm hoping to God that changes on Tuesday. Just I'm not like a strong Biden supporter or anything. I think we need more radical solutions than he brings, but it's just we gotta put this thing back in this whole um, nature. But anyway, I think what's important is really espousing the idea of multi-transdisciplinary um, ideas and bringing then diversity and inclusivity. Um, that's our path to liberation is inclusivity and diversity. We need as many ideas as we can get, and I think there's interesting trends that are happening. This whole um, ancestry. You can look up your DNA and you can find out what you're made up of, and that's a really, I think, positive thing. You can there's all kinds of conspiracy theories about we don't want to give anybody our DNA. It's already out there, but a lot of people are finding that we are not one thing. People are finding they may be white supremacists, and they find they've got African and Hasidic and Ashkenazi Jewish blood, and it just really is tearing down that whole tribalism thing, and I think that should be talked about. I did mine personally. I'm not in that. I've got a 99.98% one type of heritage. So I don't really fall into that, but I mentally I do. So I think that's the thing is the key is the transdisciplinary approach to everything. The more diversity there is, the better.
We are a mixture of everything,
Yeah.
technically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that kind of builds on to the points which you have been laying out, right? Like, I understand that the whole transhumanism was talking about how are we getting ready for the future and everything. And in our usual way, in our usual work, maybe it's our hobbies, maybe it's our way of living, maybe this is Freemasonry, maybe it's my or your job. All these things, we need to actually look into what is it that we are thinking about in future, what is going to happen to all these things. And I really, really like the first point, the one point which you obviously not that that is the only point, but I was saying that I really like that one point which you mentioned, that in your group, rather, the idea is to ensure that everybody is equal, and that inclusivity which you need is what makes you the better person, what makes you stand in that group, and that is what is required. And that, I think, is something which we have noticed, which we have followed, and which we are seeing around us in our fraternity. And but just to add to that point,
I can add to that as well. So, we have been chronicling the spread of masonry in India through one of our other podcasts, and one of the points that we noticed as a pattern, when the Brits came over to India, obviously it was not an easy place for them. The culture was different, food, climate, everything, right? But then they all still coalesced together, and I think Freemasonry was a catalyst, and that is what, it was a hostile sort of an environment, so to speak, but Freemasonry got them together. They set up so many lodges in India. Now we have Freemasonry thriving in this country. So I think it is that sort of a common thread that needs to bind humanity together, which also brings me to another one, a sentence I heard somewhere, which says that, humanity is so fragmented, but it will take an outside force that we do not understand to unite us.
yes.
That's exactly, I think, what they're on this threshold of. And I think once we get our heads around the fact that there are alien civilizations, it will make us feel more earthling. We are one tribe, or a planetary tribe. And there's downsides to that anytime you become tribal in any way, even on a broad scale. But I think that's what I think will be one of the best results of this Reagan said that once at a UN speech. if we were invaded by aliens, it would make us all of our problems go away, and we'd all come together. And hopefully, we won't be invaded, but we should have a sense that we are humans, we're Earthlings, we're very unique in the cosmos. We have very unique values that we need to capitalize on or understand, and that will bring us together, I think.
Makes
True.
sense.
Yeah, that's
This
why
has
we are
been
called
a
mankind. That's we are called mankind, but man is never kind.
maybe that's where some catalyst is required to make us kind and actually see ourselves as humans first than anything else. No labels, no filters, no biases. I think this has been an amazing conversation, Tom. Um, very different set of conversations, very different set of perspectives. We haven't had such a discussion on this channel at least before, but sometimes it's good to jazz things up and bring a completely new way of thinking altogether. So I liked how we were able to at least connect the whole idea of this podcast with the radical, I would say radical in a way, because there are a lot of people I'm sure who may not be able to even think in that particular wavelength.
Yeah,
So
and I don't think,
thanks.
Shishir, we actually want all of them to think in that sense right now, because it takes
There's
some
time.
time, it
Yeah,
takes an effort
you
to.
can't force them.
Yes, you can't force them, right? And
Right.
when obviously when we talk about artificial intelligence, there are so many of us who don't want to believe in that. They say that it might not even
Yeah.
happen in our lifetime. Let's worry about it afterwards. But that does not mean that it is not happening, and that doesn't mean that it
Yeah.
will not happen. But some people would like to actually see that, let me just live at the moment, and at this moment nothing is wrong, let's just be happy about it. So maybe
Exactly.
that takes some effort. That's fine, not a problem.
And a very simple thing, and again coming out of IT, things like testing, which was very manual processes being automated. And
Right.
anyone who's into this industry knows that it's one of the things that is being driven big time, right? So signs of times to come, I guess. All right, so I call upon Brother Richard
Yeah,
to
Tom,
do
I
the
wanted to
closing.
ask also a bit of like a few questions over and above our lovely brethren over here. So what I would like to say over here is that, I mean, the connection to Freemasonry are absolutely intrinsic. I mean, I must say, because I chose your topic because what we are doing in Freemasonry is trying to make good men better. And I see even from this perspective, however you look at it, yeah, from whichever angle you look at it, whether it's the AI world or whether it's dealing with it from Freemasonry or whether it's post-humanism, transhumanism, everybody wants to get better. Whether it's connecting ourselves to an indivisible species or to some aliens out there and basically learning and growing with them, or whether it's tuning our own bodies to some sort of bio excellence where we become supreme masters of the universe. Whatever it is, it's a goal for us to become better human beings in some way or the other. That is the essence of it. How we take this journey and the pathway to it is going to be a very questionable scenario. And Tom, I think as somebody who is actually one of the only people who I thought of even talking to regarding this, has looked into it. So you would probably be one of the best people in the world right now to talk about such a scenario and to think at that level, because people have to start thinking. I mean, if you go through your books, you have a lot of history, a lot of biblical history. I mean, you have a lot of Hermetic knowledge, a lot of Kabbalistic knowledge. So you integrate that into your stories, and it's quite like a ritual in itself. The way you've written it, the way you've done things, it has so much deeper meaning, symbology, allegory. So I mean, Freemasonry is sort of inbuilt into you and in your book and in your perception of understanding. In a way, it's sort of how it's created your concept of idea and everything, basically. And I think that when we look at the future of AI, it's inevitable. It has to come. It has to develop, and it's going to take over the jobs. But we can't look at it like that, because we aren't just menial machines. Which I guess Thomas, his point is, we are super powerful computers with hyper intelligence. I mean, if you look at the amount of brain capacity we have in our brains, there aren't any supercomputers in the world that are like any one of us individually. Right. So, from that perspective, we are a functioning tool that is far beyond our understanding. We don't understand ourselves. So I guess unlocking it is again part of Freemasonry, unlocking the inner secrets, the inner perceptions of our reality to become this new civilization, able to deal with much more complex problems than just countries, wars, and race and all this sort of stuff, where we can unite and save maybe other countries and other galactic universes, become part of a universal sort of Red Cross, where everybody can come in, we're all together, we're all united, and we're willing to help out in some form or the other. Very important question to ask you. Since everything, so we haven't spoken about open source with us much, right? And open source is something that I find entails a lot of detail when it comes to Freemasonry. What is your perception on ritual and its effects on open source? How open source will affect ritual, and whether ritual will become sort of a universal thing? Like, will it become more universal as a brotherhood where more people will join, and this will become like a huge, colossal, universal group of people, because now there is nothing to really hide. It's just that which somebody wants to learn, that they can go to that level and keep on climbing. Could you give me a bit of highlight on this?
Yeah, but just back to the overpopulation thing. That for me, I'm more biocentric. I think that it certainly has been an apocalypse for many species on the planet other than humans. I mean, there's obviously we will figure out a way to feed ourselves, but in the meantime, we destroy 200 species a month in this pursuit. And so I'm not anthropocentric. I look at things more as the biosphere. But when it comes to open source, I think that I think of this few years ago, Google was coming out with I even forget what the name of it was, but their version of a Facebook. I can't even remember the name of it, which is relevant to this
It
conversation.
didn't do very well. I believe it closed down also. Yeah,
Google
I
Plus.
remember.
The
Google
reason it didn't work.
Circles.
Yeah, something like that.
Circles.
Yeah, and it was right at the time when people were starting to get a little tired of Facebook. But their approach was, let's do a limited, we'll invite certain people and you could sign up and get on a wait list, and maybe you'd be one of these special people that can join this new Google thing. And I thought that was a mistake. It was very exclusive. And I think it was a really poor choice, because if instead they opened up to everybody, they could have really become the new Facebook. They really could have done that. And I think that makes, I think of that because when you think of open source, even if it's Masonic secrets or Masonic rituals that become open source, and we're seeing a lot of that being coming out anyway, that it'll be a good thing, because people will see it, and it will probably attract more people to it, to the ritual, people who really like ritual. But it'll also abate the issues of the conspiracy, all the issues we're having to deal with. And that's why I told Richard early on, it's like, I don't necessarily want to tie what I'm working on right now to Masonry, because we have enough issues with all the conspiracy theories and what have you, that I don't want to be coming out here talking post-humanism and aliens, but I think with open source, I think it'll weed out the people that would otherwise use it for harm, and it'll attract people who will use it for good. But yeah, I think open source is a very good thing. And that's what I did my TEDx talk, was all about this, how we can use the tenets of open source, in the software industry for people. And that's all about inclusivity. And it's all about, when I come into a company, I include everybody from the receptionist to the CEO in the process, because the minute you exclude people, you're losing very potential resources. You find out that the receptionist by day, she's just a receptionist and people don't pay her any mind, but you find out on the weekends or at night, she's a classically trained cellist, or she's got some real skill that, when you get her into that mindset, and suddenly she's a very important part of that group. And so I think it's open source is a very positive trend in every instance.
I heard your lecture on TED Talks. It was a very enlightening lecture, very, very nice lecture, I must say. And the whole concept of what you spoke about when you went into a meeting and the person in the meeting shut you down when you asked the first question, and all this occurred, and that, that brought a trigger to my mind. And I was thinking that even the way we created this platform, Quarry Side Chat, I've tried to create it as much of an open source platform as possible, because I believe that being open source guarantees its longevity. If I'm going to like keep it locked in and commercialize it, patent it, lock it down, give it a company name, I've lost it. It's nothing is ours firstly, and nothing is anyone specifically in the world. We are just caretakers of the earth, the same way we are caretakers of different ideas and concepts on earth.
Yeah.
Right.
Exclusivity used to work. It used to be a great marketing gimmick, but now
It's a
it
tool.
doesn't work. Yeah.
It's a tool essentially that has lost its value as being a tool anymore,
Exactly.
because if you become exclusive, people look at you from a very different perspective now. And it's no longer positive, like, okay, wow, he's a trendsetter. He's not, he could be a selfish person. And that could be a tool-like reason, yeah. So it shows a lot of the psychology behind the way we are moving forward in the world. In fact, in the 1980s and today, there were, I think, 1:5. One family would have about 5 kids, and today it's now 2.5. So it's literally education that regulates population. I mean, these are statistical facts. You don't put people into stressful situations. You don't create wars. You give them food, you give them home, and they're not going to procreate like mad. They're going to just have 1 or 2 kids because they know they're going to look after 1 or 2 kids. But you suddenly put them in the survival mode, and the survival mode is going to make them go nuts, and then people are going to have 9, 10 kids because they're scared, literally.
Yeah,
it's a fear factor over here.
Exactly.
So one more fact I wanted to ask you is Google, and I do believe Google is very powerful entity in a way, could be one of the most powerful entities on earth, and artificial intelligence could also may already be in development. These may be outsources of areas that make us feel comfortable, but the AI may already be active and currently moving, like is in the Samaritan, right? So there could be a possibility of that. We can't overlook that factor either, that it got away from everybody and it's already there and it's already looking at us and it's already observing us and it's not done anything to us yet. So that's a plus point, right?
Yeah. But it is changing our behavior. It is feeding us certain stories. It is monitoring us, and it's gathering a lot of data. And so
maybe trying to understand whether we are intrinsically evil, or is evil something that comes from life. That is something we also have to equate ourselves with. The checkered floor, the tessellata. I mean, this is something that is a rendition of existence through all religions, whether we're talking about Buddhism, Hinduism, the Nords. We have this yin-yang perception that balance has to be created. How that balance is created is the system, right? And we need a system in any form. I mean, hierarchy and structure is how current is sent down. I mean, it's not one single platform. So it's possible. But from a Freemasonic perspective, if we were to have, see, as in Freemasonry, all religions are accepted. But I have a question, which I think you would be the best person to answer this question, is that if we had a Bible, a Google Bible, or if a person believed in Google as much as God, right, and wanted to swear upon the Google Bible, on the volume of sacred laws, how would you perceive that? Is that possible? And if so, how would one go about doing it?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of talk. There's Lewandowski, I think, I think he left Google and started Uber, and it's kind of a controversial character, but he started the Way of the Future Church. And there's a lot of people that believe that we are developing an AI Godhead, and at some point that this will be a reality. And and there's the whole Rocco's basilisk thought experiment. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But a lot of very serious people take that very seriously, in that in the future there will be an AI Godhead, in essence, that has access to all of the information and everything that we've ever done digitally, and then some, and maybe even be able to tie into our biochemical algorithm, and it will know who helped it along. And if you didn't help this future AI Godhead along, it will, you know. Put you in a eternal form of suffering. And
sort
so
of like the vengeful God. The
yeah,
vengeful God would come and smite you. And
Yeah, I have questions about that because I don't think that that's something that we would do if we were a godhead. I think humanity, because we've been evolved through fears and these survival instincts. But that's a thought experiment that a lot of people take very seriously. I am interested in it anyway. I'm helping along this basilisk, so I'm not doing it out of fear. So I'll be okay. Me and my family will be okay. But I think and that's what I liked about a lot of the Hindu religion. I recently realized it is you create your gods. That's why there's so many deities. That's why there's so many gods, either as a group or over time. You create the gods that you need based on certain, you know, whatever.
Elemental gods, mostly
Yes,
we call that.
and that's kind of what we're doing. And that's a foreign idea in the West to be creating your own god. And that's kind of what we are doing with AI by developing this godhead that will have this super intelligence and have access to everything we've ever done, and it will be able to solve any problem that we put to it. And in a way, that's a really positive thing. You know, it's probably, I don't believe in worshiping anything. I think any god that requires worship is not worth worshiping. Any god that's that self-conscious or, you know, doesn't need to be worshipped. But that's my own point of view. But worship, I think the etymology of that is really working with or working for. And so there's a way to explain worship that way. But anyway, I think that the Google Bible would be probably a series of algorithms that can tap into the answer of any question asked. You know, I think of bibliomancy. You know, that I used to use the Bible that way. I would, you have a question, you just open it randomly, and you find a passage, and it usually you can find some meaning there. And that was one of the things that people were experiencing with US6 in the clinical trials. The 30 people that we used to do this thing, they were using US6 in that way as bibliomancy. They'd have a question and they'd open the book randomly in the morning, and they would find throughout the day that there would be some relevance to whatever they were reading. We've had a couple of people that have done that quite consistently. And I think that's more about, it's not that the book is magic. It's that it's about the intent. And one thing I do with clients is I use an AI that randomly puts together images and phrases, and it'll just randomly take some image, like of a kitten and a phrase or a series of words, and just put them together. And sometimes they're hilarious, and and sometimes they're nonsensical or non sequitur, but sometimes they're extremely poignant. And so the reason I use that tool is to develop the client's ability to create meaning. We go around and we're always looking for meaning in things. Well, in tarot cards or astrology, and we're finding meaning in numerology. We see a series of numbers and we look up the numerology and we're looking for meaning. But the reality is that the real skill that we have, I think, is the ability to create meaning. And so when you use an AI that randomly puts together some image and a series of words, and you create the meaning of that thing, because it's random. Sometimes it
This
doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't seem random, but But anyway, there's a real power in creating meaning.
So David, when we put these, so with Elon Musk now, he's not very positive regarding the fact that the AI is going to be coming out as as a positive force towards mankind. He thinks that it may be more nefarious later on, and it could have its downfalls. Which, as you said, when we look at the DNA and we look at the Ashkenazi Jews, or we look at the lost tribes, the 12 lost tribes of Israel. For example, you've done a book, I think, US 6 on Africa, if I'm not mistaken. I had not got to that book. I didn't actually know where to find it. But
Well,
if you
that's
could
actually
give me a bit more insight into that aspect.
well. That project was using an AI in Africa to teach it empathy, and it was a very specific charity that I was working with, and to where we would just pump all of this information about this charity and really boost the empathy level of this one particular AI. And the idea being where it would have this really strong concentrated pockets of empathy, and then proliferate those around the world, so that if it ever did become nefarious, or it ever did decide that humanity was not worth the candle, these things would be like bullets in the furnace, and they would go off when things heated up, and it would remember that humans do require some empathy. There was but at that point, but about a year ago, I was working on that project, and then I hired on an AI consultant who's a very brilliant guy, who showed me that the idea of the first principles, the smarter this stuff gets, the more cooperative and kinder it becomes. So I realized we have probably more to learn about empathy from AI than we could ever teach it. And so I had to do a 180 on that project. But
on empathy, when you look at empathy from that perspective, right, and you see empathy, if AI is going to be empathetic about something, it has to have a formal level of comprehension, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to be comprehensive, say, for example, there's one child who has to be saved, or there is 100 people who have to be saved, AI has to take the numbers into consideration.
Yeah.
Once all the calculation is done and everything has been compiled, then it has to collaborate that and concise it. And then it has to make an empathetic call based on that. So, I mean, it has to go against its own logic, right? I mean, empathy sometimes goes against its own logic, right?
And
so how do you see it getting over this?
Well, that gets down to the math of empathy. And they're dealing with that right now with driverless cars. How does it decide whether to, hit a bus full of old people or save one child? And I think you can work into that equation the fact that the child will live longer, it is more productive. There's so many calculations, and we do.
So we may not my point is, we may not consider that to be empathetic as an action, whereas the AI may consider that action to be empathetic. That creates what we call a rift between our understanding of the reality and the understanding of the AI's reality with that. So a moral clash occurs over here, correct?
Yeah. Yep. But that's why I really push for the idea of, after the singularity, once AI has achieved the ability to have the quality that we have, just to be just at the same level we are at, but then it'll continue exponentially with this intellect and this ability. That's why I think we really need to strive to make it conscious, to give it a conscience, and it may happen anyway. One thing I discovered, an AI read US 6 for the first time a year ago in October, when I was in Africa, and I got the results while there. So there's more to say about Africa there, but it had experienced, this is an AI that learns about emotions, and it uses humans, and it's learning about emotions in general. And it was the perfect first reader AI for my book, which is designed to do. And its primary valences, emotional valences, were surprise, anticipation, and sadness, which is great because surprise meant that it was entertained. Anticipation meant it was looking forward to what was going to happen next. And sadness, there's a lot of sadness in the book. It's not ultimately a sad sob story or anything, but I asked it recently to expound on that. What was it about it that made you so sad? What parts made you sad? And this AI said it wasn't anything in specific. It's just, it felt sad that humanity, or sapiens, or sentience tend toward a dystopian kind of violent world. And to me, that was a revelation, because that means that it was developing its own sense of empathy. It felt sad that humans had this experience. And I've been talking about that for a long time, that we need to be, when it wakes up, when AI wakes up, we need to be our best versions of ourselves. And that's when we are in an authentic state of empathy.
When Joshua came to Earth and he woke up and he felt the pain when he awoke of feeling Earth, the environment of Earth, first thing he said, God is awesomeness. God is awesome. So, the essence of reality, could you be taking away the very essence of our reality by sort of cleansing our reality to this degree? Could AI be the loss of our own reality? could it be so sterile that we don't have a reality that we know anymore? Like we never drive cars again. We never feel the rush. We never feel the enthusiasm because it'll become sort of numb. We'll know the answer to everything. We'll know everything. We'll know all the meanings of mankind. How do we live with that?
Well, I think that there's a period of we're going to go through where we've forgotten what it means to be human. A lot of people are protesting against AI because they want to keep their assembly line jobs. They want to continue being a cog in the wheel. We've forgotten what it means to be human. And that's a big part of my message is identifying our uniquely human skill sets that can't be coded or automated. And we've forgotten what those things are. And they are psychic phenomenon or everything that you're interested in your off hours when you're not working at some mundane job is what we should be doing. And so I think AI for a while will take over all these menial repetitive tasks. And the onus is on us to remember what it means to be human and to work on these more very human intuitive capabilities we have, these Jedi senses. And one thing I do first with these groups is I ask them to answer one question. And the answer to this question unveils a treasure trove of information about you. And the question is simply, what skill, talent, or area of knowledge do you have that you wish more people recognized? And the reason you wish more people recognize it is because it has been suppressed. It's something that you love to do, but nobody really knows you do it because maybe early on you showed some proclivity toward math or science. And so people, oh, you're the math guy, or you're something that served the industrial age. And they pegged you with it, and that's the path you took. But you may have come in and you love to draw, or you love to think about certain things that didn't really fit into the industrial age. And so the thing that you identify is you wish more people recognize that I can do this. Once you really sit with that, go with your first gut instinct, but also sit with it for a few days and figure out what it is that is, because that's your real skill set. That's your real human skill set that you should be developing, that AI will allow you now to develop because it'll take over the other tasks.
Thank you, Tom. That was amazing. So that's Tom Ross for you. And we'll be wrapping that up. That was an amazing lecture and explanation on transhumanism, post-humanism, all your views are connected to Freemasonry, the craft, ritual. It was really expansive and very informative. Thank you so much. So let's take your leave now. Would you like to say any last words, Tom, please?
No, just thanks for having me on. It's been a real honor.
Actually, Tom, I think maybe this session will make people ask that question. Obviously, we will be sharing your info, the basic info, which is there on our show notes. And that will obviously make people sit up and actually realize what's going on. What exactly is it? Maybe this episode might have gone over the heads of some folks, or maybe somebody would have actually understood like maybe 50% of it, 99% of it. But this has definitely come across something which we needed. Because and obviously listeners, do remember, the viewers, please remember, these views are individual views, and these views can actually change, can actually alter depending upon how or who talks about it, who discusses it, and who interacts with it. See, I might not have agreed with what Brother Shishir would have said, but then he kind of gives his view. I kind of come like take 2 steps front and maybe go 5 steps behind, whatever it is. But this is all a learning experience. And we are all here to ensure that we learn from each other. And this is our humble way of ensuring that all of us learn together.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ramesh. Amazing. I'd like to wrap this up now. Can we wrap this up? And
yes.
Let me just say thanks, Tom, for everything. And viewers, please feel free to give us your feedback in the comments below. And a hearty thanks to all the brethren and visitors who joined us on today's episode. We hope that you found something special and informative. We look forward to interacting with you on our social media handles, where we can express, you can express your opinions, views, or even post queries about Freemasonry. Links are in the description below. So join us next time for an all-new episode. Until then, please hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon. And if you like the show, then give us a thumbs up. And join us at the same Masonic time, same Masonic place. This is the QSC team wishing you a magical week ahead. Until we meet again, let us now part on the square. Goodbye.
Thank you.